Okay, we are now recording. All right, welcome. Today is July 11th, 2018, and we are here for the 2018 Federal Fiscal Year LSTA Grant Project Management Paperwork webinar. This webinar is not about how you will manage the actual action part of your grant. It's how you manage the paperwork and reporting part of your grant. Paperwork, the devil is in the details, and paperwork is super important because we are documenting, you are documenting all of the good work that you're doing with this federal LSTA money, and you're showing what you did, how you did it, why you did it, and the benefits to your target audience. So that's why it's important. And, you know, being a federal grant and a state agency, we have a lot of rules and a lot of guidelines, and it's best that we all follow them just because it makes everything run smoother. It takes a lot to figure out who needs what, but that's why we're here. Okay, so we'll go on to the first slide. Oops. Okay, so here we go. Our agenda today. I'm going to talk about the LibGuide for 2018. There was a 2017 LibGuide, but the structure is different. So just if you have a link to that, just ignore it for 2018. We'll start fresh with 2018. We're going to talk about all the required forms and the grant and aid, the GIA, the surveys, reimbursements, because we have to pay you for all the money that you spend on this project, quarterly reports, and match, because, well, quarterly reports and match, we'll just leave it at that. The final evaluation, which also relates to the state program report. The state program report is mine. That's what I submit to IMLS, but it's made up of all of your final evaluations. So everything that you submit to me, I pretty much submit word for word to IMLS. And the reason that's important is because all of these reports are now searchable, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Records retention, so all this paperwork that we're diligently keeping in order, and you need to keep it. You need to keep it until 2026, so we'll talk about that. Limited English proficiency. This is sort of new. It's not really new. It's been in existence for a while with federal grants, but IMLS has informed me that we need to actually talk about it and make sure that we are making our programs accessible to people with limited English proficiency. Then we're doing publicity, because, you know, everyone wants to know about all the great stuff that you do, and site visits, which I have not done. We haven't done those in a few years, but those are part of grant monitoring, and we're going to start them up again. Any questions so far? Okay, next slide. So this is the first agenda item. It's the LibGuide. I've sort of compiled everything that I think you could possibly need to manage your grant into this LibGuide. The address is right there, if you can see it. Do you guys see my pointer when I move it around the screen? Yes, okay. So this is the link to the Manage section. This here is a screenshot of what it looks like. It's structured into these main sections. Apply, so if you want to apply for any type of 2018 LSTA grant, you click that. Manage, this is what we're talking about right here. The signature forms, the surveys have their own tab because they're super important. General information, this is guidance from IMLS, and it's also where you'll find our 5-year LSTA plan. General information, oh, wait, I already said that. Grant writing tips. I've just aggregated a whole lot of data sources here for writing your proposal, and there's stuff about outcomes if you maybe need some guidance on how to do outcomes, and a link to all of the state library's grant writing books. You can borrow those anytime. They're in our professional development collection. And then the very last thing, projects funded. If you want to just look around and see what we funded over the past 5 years, this is where you go. Okay, any questions? Okay, all right. Next slide. Right, so maybe you visited our website and you've noticed that it looks a little bit different. We reconfigured a whole bunch of stuff, And I've been informed that LSTA is not that easy to find anymore. So here is step by step how you would find the LSTA LibGuide if you don't have it bookmarked. You go to nsla.libguides.com, or you can still type in our old address, nsla.nv.gov. It'll still go there. Once you're there, you go to Library for librarians and partners, because that's what you guys are. You're our partners. Then LSTA. You click on LSTA, and you'll get to the LSTA page. And we have 2018 grants, apply, that takes you to the apply section, manage, that's where you'll want to go to manage all your stuff. And then again, if you want to browse awarded grants, you would click on that. If you want to look at last year's stuff, go to 2017 and nose around, and it's all perfectly good. Okay, any questions about the LibGuide? The LibGuide is, I think it's really important. You should bookmark it. You should bookmark it and go to there if you have any questions that well, if you can't get a hold of me, look there. All right. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on. Next thing is the required signature forms. These documents, which most of you have already submitted and signed, these are required by IMLS. They are assurances and certifications. You're saying that by accepting this LSTA grant, you're going to comply with everything that the federal government, every federal government regulation. Human trafficking is one of them, right? You think that's odd, libraries don't do human trafficking, but you're certifying that your grant has nothing to do with that. These are, the state library has to sign the same documents, and as subgrantees, then we have to have you sign the same thing. Also, as part of the required signature forms are, I'm sort of lost, sorry. You're also certifying that you will spend your money as allowed by the federal government. So if we go back to the LibGuide, IMLS Guidance, that's where you'll find all of the federal guidance that like informs how we are allowed to spend money and what the purposes and priorities of LSTA are. Okay. So we need one set of these forms per federal grant year. If you have any other LSTA grants, if you get a micro grant, if you get a continuing education grant, we only need one set. So one set per year and you're all good. But without this, without these documents, without them being signed, we can't give you your money. Make sense? Any questions? Okay, excellent. We'll move on. Okay, the next form is the grant in aid. And I think most of you have received your grant in aid award and signed it and returned it. And we're in the process of getting Jeff Kintop, who is the State Librarian Division Administrator, signed it. Basically, the grant in aid is your contract. It gives you authority to spend money. And it's a legal document. The contract will have your grant number on it, your project grant number. So if you have a form that asks for your grant number, look at the grant in aid, it'll be right there. For this year, it'll be 18 something, 1801, 1802. That's your grant number. It's got the project dates. That's the period that your project's happening. That's when you're allowed to expend funds. Anything that is outside of the GIA dates is not part of your grant. Let's see, it's got the award amount, and it has in the wording that the budget that we have awarded you for this, it will, let's see, let me back up. It's per your approved budget in your application. So however you submitted your application, unless you updated it, all of those categories, you had $5,000 in supplies, materials, that's your approved budget. So your award needs, you need to spend money within those approved budget categories. The next one, deadline to ask for budget or programmatic changes, that's in the GIA. That's important too, because as I said, this is a contract. And if you want to change your budget categories by more than 10%, or you want to extend your project, or you have a whole, maybe you want a different outcome, we have to change the terms of the contract, and we have to get the Deputy Attorney General to approve, and it takes some time. So it's not impossible. It's actually very doable, but it just takes some time. The GIA has your reporting dates. It's got your record retention schedule. It's got terms for termination. So if for some reason you decide you don't want to do this grant anymore, which I hope would never happen, it tells you how to terminate the contract. Fiscal authority. So if anyone asks you why you're allowed to have this money, this shows our federal LSTA grant. It shows the authority. We were given this grant money and we have authority to grant it to you. And then finally, the GIA has my contact information. So that's your GIA. That's important. Any questions about that? All righty, sweet. All right, next, required surveys. So this is a fairly new thing. IMLS just told me about this last year, so I put it into federal fiscal year 17 grants, but I didn't really talk about it or push it because the surveys hadn't been approved yet by the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, but they have been approved now, which means they are required. And the reason IMLS is doing this is, you know, LSTA has to be reapproved every year. And a very good way to show value is through outcomes, and outcomes are difficult. We know outcomes are difficult to measure. And so one very good way to measure outcomes is through surveys. So you do surveys. And with these surveys, you can see who benefited, what needs changing, all of that. So that is why IMLS is requiring them. And they're going to be closely monitoring compliance. So, which means I will be closely monitoring compliance. If you do an activity that requires a survey, you know, if you miss one, we're human, we forget, but please just remember that this is important for our outcomes and for our reporting. And we will be getting to the surveys next. All right, so you've got a survey. When and who do you survey? Right here. If you have instructional programs, and what we're doing right now is an instructional program, and the benefit is either the public or the library workforce, then you give a survey. You give a survey and you find the results. Right? If you acquire any kind of content for your library staff, for the library workforce, survey them to see if it was useful. You don't have to survey the public if you acquire, if you build up your collection, that you don't have to do that. But if it's aimed at your staff, you do need to survey. If you create any kind of content for the library workforce, you need to survey. So in line with that, I've created a LibGuide for the library workforce, which is you. So at the end of the year, I'll be sending out a survey to ask you what you thought of the LibGuide, if it was useful, and what could be different, how we can improve. Okay, does that make sense? And then, finally, planning evaluation. So if you've got a planning grant, you will need to survey your staff. Planning grants, I think technically are for the benefit of the library, to know how libraries are meant to serve their constituents better. Sound right? So survey the staff. Okay, any questions about when and why we're surveying? It's good. I think it's good. Outcomes are really difficult to measure, I think, and this is just one nice tool to help you with your outcomes. Okay, we're just cruising along. All right. If you are a public library, I encourage you to go to Project Outcome and make use of their tool. Unfortunately, it's only for public libraries, so not for academics or schools. But if you're a public library, they have a whole software system where you can enter your data and it will give you data visualizations. It not only has immediate surveys, but follow-up surveys. There's a whole bunch of surveys. It's not just instructional programs, but there's a whole suite of surveys. But the only one that is applicable to LSTA is the instructional program for the public. Yeah, take a look at it. If it works for you, I think it will. I've looked at their webinars and I've read their documentation, and it seems like it's a very, very good system that they have. I personally have not used it because state libraries at the moment aren't able really to make use of it, but I know that they've got some changes in there and some code updates, so maybe I'll be able to enter survey questions for statewide programs as well. But take a look at it. And the benefit of doing this, if you're a public library, is, all right, here we go. This is the project outcome. What is it? It's the interface. I've created a template. If you use this template, if you create a survey using this template and you upload all your results, I can get them. You don't have to report them to me. You don't have to fill them out on a spreadsheet. You don't have to fill out the form. I can get them pretty much as soon as you do them. And by doing this, you'll be adding to all of the data that PLA is aggregating. Oh, Amy has used it. Yes, it's very helpful. I think it is. I think you can spot trends, and they can use this and spot trends across the country and maybe use it to help guide programs and policy. But anyway, yeah, take a look. I'm not requiring that you use it, but please do if you can. Okay? All right. Any questions about surveys? I want to also add, don't send me the surveys. IMLS and we don't want stacks of paper, just the end results. And unfortunately, you do need to keep the actual paper surveys because they are part of your grant project. You can scan them and be done with it. Also, I was uncertain about teens and children, but I did double check. You shouldn't be surveying the children. You should be surveying their parents. Teens, you can survey teens. That's sort of discretional, up to you, depending on their age. And no names, of course, right? Okay, any questions about that? Okay, nice. Okay, we've covered surveys. Next up, reimbursement and match. So Nevada is a reimbursement-only state. Other states function a little differently, but here you pay for your project. You buy the stuff, you submit backup, you submit a request, and then we reimburse you. And it works the same for us. We reimburse you, and then we ask IMLS for reimbursement for that. It's all a reimbursement. We need backup, though, for the reimbursement. So you go out and buy books from Baker and Taylor, and you give me an invoice. That's not enough, unfortunately. We need proof that you've paid that invoice, which usually is something from your financial software. Shows Baker and Taylor payment for $5,000, right? If you paid with a company credit card, I just got confirmation, you still need proof of payment. So you can show me an invoice that says you've paid with your blah blah library's credit card, but then I still need a printout that shows that that credit card was paid. And it may seem redundant, but that is state policy, and we need to comply with state policy. So it also seems a little silly, but I've been told that there are instances where subgrantees, due to miscommunication, sent us the invoice and never paid the vendor. We don't want things like that to happen. We want it to be nice and clean. So backup. The more backup you have, the better. Also backup is the time and effort form. And this is, if you are using LSTA to pay any kind of salaries, like manpower salaries, or you hire someone just for this project, we need to have a time and effort. And the time and effort is basically your federal timesheet. Like a payroll printout, that's not enough because it shows they get paid. The time and effort has the job duty descriptions and the hours that that person spent doing that job duty. And we have to have that for reimbursement of any kind of salaries. And it's not that, I hope it's not that onerous. Have your staff just fill it out as they go and sign it as they go so you don't have to scramble backwards. I have to fill one out too. I'm federally funded, so I need to fill a time and effort out too. Job descriptions, job duties, number of hours per day spent on it. And then on the reimbursement form, this is where you can report your match. So we'll go to the next screen. Oops, wait, there we go. This is what the reimbursement form looks like. There's your name, the grant number. Remember, that's on your GIA. We need the contact info of the person submitting. So if I'm confused or I need some more info, I can contact you. We need it signed. And then budget categories. So these were your budget categories that were in your application. So you put the budget category, like supplies, materials, vendor or payee, Baker and Taylor, product or service, early learning collection, blah, blah, blah. The invoice number and then the amount to reimburse. And so for every line here, you're also going to supply backup. So you list it there, and then you give a copy of the invoice and a copy of proof of payment. And then if you have any match in that category, just put it right there. Right? And then you add it all up. Send it to me, send it to NSLA, PR, LSTA. Retain the original copy for your grant records. This up here, request report number. So if this is your first request, put request 1. It helps me keep track of how much you've requested reimbursement for. If it says 2 and I only show that I have 1, then there's been a gap somewhere. So that helps me. And then final, if it's your final, that helps us too. You may have $50 left, and without calling you, I don't know if you intend to actually spend that final $50 or if you're done and you're returning it. So just put yes or no. Okay, any questions there? Also, we have no deadlines, no actual schedule for reimbursement, but I would request that you do this timely. We don't want you to be out a whole ton of money, your library to be out a lot of money because you have waited a year to ask for reimbursement. And it helps us too, is our financial people pay for it, and then we ask IMLS for money, and so it helps us spend it down. So just timely, right? Okay, any questions? Okay, how are we doing on time? I don't have a time. Oh, thank you, Norma. Okay, the next one is the time and effort. Again, this is your federal timekeeping if you have federal salaries. You can tweak this form to line up with your own, reporting. If your LSTA person only does one thing and one thing only, I've talked to, I've consulted with other libraries, other states. You can sort of tweak this to, instead of being a week, to reflect your library's payroll periods. Does that make sense? Okay, okay, good. So this needs to be submitted with your reimbursement when you're asking for salaries. Okay, all right. All right, we're just cruising through. Now we have reports. So reports are, let me get to that. All right, reports are part of the project monitoring process. And I haven't gone out for site visits because that's also part of the project monitoring process, but quarterly reports help us, just keep up to date with what you're doing. If you have a competitive or mini grant, I'm asking for reports every quarter. Last year for federal fiscal year 17, I waived the fourth quarter because everyone seemed on track, and if you weren't on track, I knew what was going on. It's possible I'll waive the fourth quarter report next year, but it's due 1 month after the quarter. So the quarter ends September 30th. Your first quarterly reports, if you have a competitive or mini grant, is October 31st, Nevada Day, Halloween. If you have a micro grant, they're smaller projects. They're probably a little less complicated. So after some consultation with other states, we're just going to have one report, your final evaluation. And, oh, what was that?
You have a question from Amy in chat.
Oh, do we need to do a time and effort if we are using it as matching? That was something I discussed with Karen Starr, if you remember her, and we had agreed to yes. And yes. So yes, please, Amy. Okay. I think it doesn't have to be as detailed. If you're doing match, you don't have to fill one out for every single day, for every single week if your match isn't every single day, every single week. Okay. Okay. Oh, Norma has an excellent point. Typo. The final evaluation for competitive and mini grants is due October 1st or 2nd, 2019. 2019. Yeah, that's a year and several months away, not just a few months. The final evaluation, if you have a federal fiscal year 17 grant, is due October 1st. So after your project ends, you have a couple months to gather everything and think about it and write your final eval. So yeah, strike that. It is the 19th. Thank you. So where were we? Yeah, that's it for reports. Other states do group conference chats. I was told that works really well. We just all get on the phone and talk at each other, and you ask questions and maybe someone else answers. I will send a survey out and see if you guys want to do that. It might be good for people who haven't had an LSTA grant for a while. It might not be useful, but it might be very useful just, to know that you are not alone in this process, that paperwork is drowning everybody. So we can talk about that. And same with micro grants. If you guys want to sit down and have some sort of group chat about what's going on, we can do that, and I'll send a survey out to you. Okay. So reports. Again, if you have a competitive or mini grant, you have at least 4 reports, if not 5. You have 3 quarterly reports and possibly a 4th, 1 final evaluation, and then your reimbursement requests, which I guess count as reports as well because it shows us how you're doing on your budget. Okay. Oh, here's a slide that gives a little bit more detail about the quarterly reports. It's pretty simple. I think there are only a few questions. The first one is your target audience. How do you think your target audience is feeling from your grant? Is it helping them? Be honest. If you haven't quite gotten there yet, it's okay. Just tell us. And then that kind of goes with progress. Are you on track? So this goes back to your budget, not your budget, your project timeline that was on your application. Are you actually meeting all those steps during the right months that you said you were? Are you ahead of schedule? Are you behind schedule? And if you are, how is that affecting everything? And so again, this is not a bad thing, but it helps us to know what's going on. And maybe if you will need an extension. Okay, and then the last part is your budget. So put what you've expended in that quarter. And then important to me is what you've been reimbursed. Because if you've spent $5,000 and I have like 0 reimbursement requests, I'm not sure if you haven't submitted them or if I missed it and haven't paid you. So I would like to be able to double check that everything that you think that you've submitted, I've actually gotten, right? Does that make sense? And then the balance, what's left to spend, and then just report your match to date, because we want to make sure you're on track with that too. Okay, any questions about that? So all of these dates, those are on the LibGuide under important dates, and they're also on your GIA when all of these things are due. They're in 2 places, and if you can't remember, call me or email me. Okay, and I will send a reminder out maybe a month before they're due, right? Okay, guys, first quarter report is due. Okay. Oh, here we have the final evaluation. I have the correct date on here, 2019. This is for competitive and mini. If you have a micro grant, your final eval is due like a month after your project ends. And these are the things that we are asking for in the final evaluation. And all these sections should sort of be standalone narratives. You know, I should be able to like pick up your activity evaluation summary and understand completely what you did in that activity without being lost. It's like sequels to books. You should be able to pick up number 3 in a series and know what's going on without having to go back and read 1 and 2. Ideally, every section is a standalone section. Lessons learned, that is, I think that's a really important part of this reporting process, because we can do the same grant over and over and over again, and we can do it across the country and make the same mistakes. But if you tell us what you learned and what you would change if you had to do it all over again, we can help, you know, the next generation of people doing the same sort of project that you're doing. And they will be able to look at this, because if we look here at examples, it says searchable state program report. If you click that link, you'll get a database. And every single final evaluation that you guys have submitted to the state library since federal fiscal year 14 is now in a searchable database. And that's not just for Nevada, it's for every LSTA grant across the country. So 50 states plus several territories. I'm not sure how many territories, 6, 7. All of their projects are there and searchable. And that's why these narratives should be standalone, because they can search by activity. If people want to know standalone, I mean, they want to know summer reading program activities, and they put that in as a keyword in this searchable state program report, and yours pops up, that may be all that they see without going and looking at your whole grant. So this is far off into the future, but when you're doing your final evaluations, just bear in mind that everyone in the country will be able to read them. So I do edit some of your things for clarity and typos, but mostly it's your words that are going directly into this. And this is a good thing because I don't want to speak for you. I want you to speak in your own voice and tell the country how your project went. But another thing to think about with final evals, and we'll do a webinar in a year about this. If you want certain things to appear searchable, like links to web pages you've designed, they should be in one of the narrative sections. They shouldn't be in the additional information. So if I ask you for photos and publicity and anecdotes, if you put links there, they won't be searchable. The photos are not searchable. These things are not searchable. Only the narrative parts are. So if you developed a really cool website, put the URL in your project summary. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so since we're talking about paperwork, we also need to talk about how long you need to keep the paperwork. IMLS Guidance, the link is right there on the bottom. That right there tells us how long we have to keep all this paperwork. We need to keep paperwork for 3 years after the final state program report for the current LSTA plan has been submitted to IMLS. That's like, it sounds complicated. We're in the current plan, 2018 to 2022. So that means the final state program report that I submit, or the LSTA coordinator submits, will be the last day of December of 2023. And so records need to be kept for 3 years beyond that, which is December 31st, 2026. We are format neutral. So that means if it was born on paper and you have the original signatures, keep those. But when you scan and send them to me, I keep a digital copy in my files. So my files will have your digital copy, but you will have the original. So keep all the originals that you have. And as to what you keep, that's in this blue section. Keep your application, the GIA, all of your signed certifications. Don't keep every single email that I send, unless it's important, unless you think it's important. If I say, oh, go ahead and you can change the vendor because that vendor is no longer available, you might want to keep that. If I just say, hey, your quarterly reports are due, you don't need to keep that email. That's it. So keep all your paperwork and keep it secure for another 8 years. Let's see, Amy, let me ask a clarifying question. We cannot scan and keep digitally. I don't have any paper files. Amy, you have a very good question. I checked this with our public records, where the Nevada State Library Archives and Public Records. I checked with public records and they're format neutral. You might have different, your county might have different regulations or requirements. So I would see if they're good with you keeping everything digital, then I'd say we're good to go. I personally, if I have the original in paper, I just keep it. Okay, I hope that's correct. Let me know what you find out, and then I can clarify it with our public records. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay, limited English proficiency. So this is newly on my radar. I knew that we were meant to tell you about it. So in the 2018 grant manual and in IMLS guidance, I have IMLS's limited English proficiency policies. But I just learned that Nevada needs to develop its own policy. So that will be coming soon. And until that happens, just pay attention to IMLSs. And this dates back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that, no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. In 2000, we got a little more detailed with Executive Order 13166, which says people who are limited English proficiency should have meaningful access to federally conducted and federally funded programs and activities. And IMLS has sort of taken all this and crunched it down and submitted, they have created an 8-page document that in essence says, if you receive federal LSTA funds, you must take reasonable steps to provide meaningful access to people with limited English proficiency. That's really vague. As we develop this policy, we'll talk about what that actually means. But essentially, if you need to hire a translator to translate some of your documents, you can apply for a micro grant to help you do that into whatever languages that are prevalent in your area and for which you've had, requests to participate. So there's that. We will be doing that too. We will be taking reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to LEP persons. Okay, any questions about that? Sweet, okay. All right, now we're on to publicity. We're almost done. Because LSTA must be reauthorized every year by Congress, IMLS at the last conference I went to urged everyone to, what's the word I want? We want to be visible. We want LSTA to be visible, and we want people to understand that these great programs are, these are federally funded, and IMLS is important, LSTA is important. It's important to our community, it's important to our services. So one way to do that is social media. If you post anything to social media, tag IMLS. And then they'll see it, right? So they won't just get your end report. They won't just get the state program, SPR state program report that shows the final. This is what we did and this is the final. They won't get it all after the fact. They'll get all your information as you go. You tweet something, tag IMLS. If you put it on Facebook, there's their @ You can also tag the state library. Same with Twitter, tweet at them. I have this great LSTA program. Now I have this great program at IMLS. And then they can use that to document the spread and the reach of LSTA from, Las Vegas to Ely. It's important. And if you do this, document it for your final report. You had 15 retweets or 5,000 retweets and 1 share or 500 likes. It's nice to know. It's nice to know that maybe people are seeing it and they're sharing it, right? So there's social media. Another thing, invite the state library to your party. So if you're having an event, invite Jeff, invite Tammy. You can invite me too. I may not be as fun as Jeff or Tammy, but that I think is a good thing. And also the State Council on Libraries and Literacy. We have 17 members. They represent a lot of different areas. They're spread throughout the state. So if you have something that you think maybe the K-12 library representative should know about or attend, let us know, and maybe we can hook you up with them and they can attend. right? Okay, and then if you have a press release, send it to me so I can send it to IMLS. And the reason we do that is IMLS can then look at your press release and see who and if and how, not how, but if they can forward this press release to the appropriate federal person, whether it's your congressman or a representative of an agency. And if you're doing something with workforce, they can forward it to whatever the federal agency is in charge of economic and workforce development, right? Plus, then also we can use all the publicity help we can get, I think. So IMLS may be able to help you promote. And then finally is the credits. Just slap a logo on everything. Just print them out on little stickers and put them in your books and on your equipment that you buy. Make sure the logo is on the press release. If you're really, really limited in space, this is sort of unofficial, but during the LSTA coordinators conference, they said at the minimum, just say this project was made possible by federal LSTA funds, right? They'd prefer the whole long 2-sentence thing, but at least if you say that, it puts that in the back of their craw, right? And if you need these credits in Spanish, IMLS has them in Spanish. They might also have them in other languages, but I would need to find that out. So we want to promote all the good work you're doing. We want you to promote all the good work you're doing, right? Okay. And then, oh, this is our almost last slide. It's site visits. The state library has not done site visits in a little bit, so we need to start doing them. It's part of the grant monitoring process. I don't think they're that awful. We want to see what you're doing and we want to participate. So seriously, if you have an event, invite us. We can make that as part of our site visit. We can, go to the activity. We can meet some of your staff. We can meet some of the participants. We can see your collections. It will all be good. So we will coordinate with all of you for site visits for this year. And it will either be me or Tammy. And I think Norma, too, is in the site visit loop. So, or maybe you'll get all three of us. So there's the project part. We want to see your project in action. If you're doing a planning project, maybe we can somehow help with your planning. And by attending, let us know. And then the second part of the site visit is the paperwork. All this paperwork that we're talking about. We want to see how you're managing it, how you're storing it, and that won't be punitive. We'll just see what you're doing, and if it's all good, it's all good. If it's maybe lacking, we'll make suggestions on better ways to organize. Questions, comments, concerns? Site visits ideally will happen once your project is going, right? So not next month. Probably not even this summer unless you start immediately. Maybe in the winter. Okay. All right, here's my contact info if you don't already have it. My email and phone number. I ask that you send your paperwork to this NSLAPRLSTA. That I see a typo. That is a comma. That's not meant to be a comma in admin. But this generic email goes to me, it goes to Tammy Westergaard, goes to Norma, and it goes to Matt Irwin. So if I get hit by a bus, someone has your paperwork, and someone's got the paperwork trail, and we can see all that you've done. And there are just other people who are in the loop and aware. That's why I don't ask you to send your paperwork just to me. Karen Starr instituted this a few years ago, and I rather like it. So that's that. And then we're almost done. You have one more opportunity to ask me questions. right now for the webinar record. Okay. Final slide. We talked about surveys, and I have to follow the survey rule two in addition. So since this is an instructional program meaning it's not passive, it's interactive, for the library workforce, I have a survey for you. I would greatly appreciate it if you took the survey. You can copy this down. I will also be posting the link on the LibGuide under the webinar section. So it's under Manager Grant and then Webinars, and it will have the slide deck, it will have the recording, and it will have this survey link. And I will use that to decide if, sections should be added, sections should be deleted, we don't need to do surveys, we need to do more, all that sort of stuff. Okie doke, guys, we are done. Questions? You can go. Thank you for joining me.